Hello my darlings, my name is Silvadorkable. I am your friendly monster waifu, and today we are playing a new game called Dagon by H.P. Lovecraft. How's it going, Cuervo and Data? And yes, that was me clicking in all of the different keywords for the video. So, for those of you who do not know, I happen to be a fan of H.P. Lovecraft style horror. Although I do not know the entire collection of his work, because it's quite extensive to my understanding, I do like the concept of his horror. His horror is very, almost existential. There's a lot of existential dread and, like, realizing that there's these great beasts that are so much bigger and mightier and grander than you can ever comprehend, and that you are such an insignificant little piece that they don't even care about you. Like, the way that he did horror was very grand. How's it going, Thork? So, this has amazing reviews. I know very little about it. However, judging by the fact that it's called Dagon, I would believe that it probably has something to do with the deep ones, if I'm not mistaken. So I believe I have one DLC on this. So, alright. Ooh. Okay. Dagon is a faithful interactive adaptation of H.P. Lovecraft's work, focused on story and atmosphere. You will not find difficult choices, action sequences, or inventory management here, and movement is limited to progressing through locations along with the plot.
I am writing this under an appreciable mental strain, since by tonight I shall be no more.
Fun fact, I actually will probably be doing Lovecraft stories. As far as, like, reading them when I get my VTuber up and running. During the game, you will encounter interactive elements. Some of them will allow you to continue your journey. Others reveal interesting facts about the original short story, its historical background, and the author. Alright. Some of the trivia is hidden. In order to find these secrets, focus your eyes and look for the Elder sign. Ooh, the Elder sign. Okay, so right click. Oh. Anyone else, like... Oh, I can't really, like, move. Anyone else, like, super weirded out by this weird pickle tentacle design? Ah! Lovecraft's letters. As to letters, my case is peculiar. I write such things exactly as easily and as rapidly as I would utter the same topics in conversation. Indeed, epistolary expression is with me largely replacing conversation as my condition of nervous prostration becomes more and more acute. I cannot bear to talk much now, and am becoming as silent as the spectator himself. My loquacity extends itself on paper. H.P. Lovecraft to Reinhard Kleiner, December 23, 1917. Through his life, Lovecraft penned around 100,000 letters to his friends and fans, out of which about 10% survive to this day. But his How's it going, Joey? But his tendency to endless correspondence was a relatively late growth. In youth, I scarcely did any letter writing, thinking anybody for a present was so much of an ordeal that I would rather have written a 250-line pastoral or a 20-page treatise on the rings of Saturn. Selected letters, 1929 to 1931. H.P. Lovecraft. Lovecraft would often skip meals to afford postage. Collections of his correspondence have been published in various books, and selected letters can be found online. Some readers consider them his most important legacy. Oh, the voice from Darkest Dungeon is really good. That that seriously gives me like an anxiety attack every time he opens his mouth because I'm just like, oh shit, what did I do? You can read the discovered trivia immediately or go back to them later in the main menu. Turn off displaying trivia if you find that the feature distracts you from the story. This can be changed at any time in the options. Okay, so we found that. Can I not turn that way? Well, I'm guessing that takes me forward. I can't turn around. No, can't turn around. Okay.
Penniless, and at the end of my supply of the drug which alone makes life endurable, I can bear the torture no longer, and shall cast myself from this garret window into the squalid street below.
Oh, so we're killing ourselves.
Do not think from my slavery to morphine that I am a weakling or a degenerate. When you have read these hastily scrawled pages, you may guess, though never fully realize, why it is that I must have forgetfulness or death.
Morphine. Morphine entered into use in the 19th century and was routinely administered to treat severe pain during the American Civil War of 1861 to 1865 and World War I of 1914 to 1918. It was also sold without restriction until 1914. Morphine became more popular after the invention of hypodermic syringe around 1854. Frederick Sir Turner, who first isolated the substance, originally named it morphium after Morpheus, the Greek god associated with dreams. At the time when Dagon was published, morphine abuse, known as soldier's disease, already posed a big problem in the United States. Well, I feel like if Lovecraft was around today, he probably wouldn't be a racist, because I feel like that is a lot less likely to happen in this day and age than back then. At least I'd like to hope he wouldn't be a racist. Because I really like Lovecraft as an author, but yeah, it is a little pitiful that he was a racist, but... Goes forward, anything else I should look at? No? Okay.
It was in one of the most open and least frequented parts of the broad Pacific that the packet of which I was supercargo fell a victim to the German sea raider.
Oh, okay. We're just here now. Anything for me? Lovecraft and the Great War. Dagon was written around a month after the United States entered World War I. Lovecraft was actively interested in its course. He composed many poems in which he gave encouragement to soldiers and commented on the events unfolding in Europe. He tried to enlist in the army, which he mentions in one of the letters to Reinhard Kleiner. Some time ago, impressed by my entire uselessness in the world, I resolved to attempt enlistment despite my almost invalid condition. I argued that if I chose a regiment soon to depart for France, my sheer nervous force, which is not inconsiderable, might sustain me till a bullet or piece of shrapnel could more conclusively and effectively dispose of me. Letters to Reinhard Kleiner, H.P. Lovecraft. But even though he passed the physical exam, his mother prevented him from going to war. She has threatened to go to any lengths, legal or otherwise, if I do not reveal all the ills which unfit me for the army. I am Providence. The Life and Times of H.P. Lovecraft. But yeah, I mean, he definitely was a human that had his flaws.
The Great War was then at its very beginning, and the ocean forces of the Hun had not completely sunk to their later degradation. So that our vessel was made a legitimate prize, whilst we of her crew were treated with all the fairness and consideration due us as naval prisoners.
Well, that was at least kind of them. The Huns. The Huns were Central Asian nomads who established a dominion in Europe and invaded the Roman Empire in the 5th century AD. They were known as brutal, deadly warriors and masters of quick raids who also developed powerful composite bows, lassos, and early siege weapons. During World War I, the British used the word Hun as a synonym for Germans in order to emphasize their brutality. However, the term originated when the German Emperor Wilhelm II gave his speech to his troops on the 27th of July 1900 before they embarked to China. Should you encourage the enemy, he will be defeated. No quarter will be given. Prisoners will not be taken. Whoever falls into your hands is forfeited. Just as 1,000 years ago the Huns under their king Attila made a name for themselves, one that even today makes them seem mighty in history and legend. May the name German be affirmed by you in such a way in China that no Chinese will ever again dare to look cross-eyed at a German. The refusal to take prisoners was a clear breach of the laws and customs of war adopted during the First Hague Convention in 1899.
So liberal, indeed, was the discipline of our captors, that 5 days after we were taken, I managed to escape alone in a small boat with water and provisions for a good length of time.
Wow. Apparently they just really didn't care. Nothing?
When I finally found myself adrift and free, I had but little idea of my surroundings. Never a competent navigator, I could only guess vaguely by the sun and stars that I was somewhat south of the equator.
Okay, for the record, this may not necessarily be a jump scare horror game, but for those of you who don't know, I have mild thalassophobia, and just this scene of being out on the water with nothing around me is horrifying.
Of the longitude, I knew nothing, and no island or coastline was in sight.
Like, this makes me very uncomfortable. Like, really, really uncomfortable.
The weather kept fair, and for uncounted days I drifted aimlessly beneath the scorching sun, waiting either for some passing ship or to be cast on the shores of some habitable land.
While Mimikyu is one of my favorite Pokemon, that's actually not, it's not Spitting Hearts for that reason. I think it's Spitting Hearts because technically speaking, I think that's me. The return to short stories. Dagon was written in July 1917 and first published in 1919 in The Vagrant, an amateur magazine focused on the supernatural. The story is the first of his stories that introduced an element from the Cthulhu mythos, Dagon itself. A pagan cult worshipping Dagon later appears in The Shadow over Innsmouth, one of Lovecraft's most popular works. I know about that one. In 1917 is also the year when he wrote The Tomb, a a story about Jarvis Dudley, a daydreamer who discovers a mysterious mausoleum in the woods by his house and becomes obsessed with it. These two works marked Lovecraft's return to short story writing after he burned most of his attempts at the genre 9 years prior and decided to concentrate on poetry. Lovecraft stated that it was his friend William Paul Cook, a literary publisher and critic, who convinced him to start writing weird fiction again.
But neither ship nor land appeared, and I began to despair in my solitude upon the heaving vastness of unbroken blue. The change happened whilst I slept. Its details I shall never know. For my slumber, though troubled and dream-infested, was continuous.
Oh. Well, hello. This is... interesting.
When at last I awoke, it was to discover myself half sucked into a slimy expanse of hellish black mire, which extended about me in monotonous undulations as far as I could see, and in which my boat lay grounded some distance away.
Did you get thrown from
Though
it?
one might well imagine that my first sensation would be of wonder at so prodigious and unexpected a transformation of scenery, I was in reality more horrified than astonished. For there was in the air and in the rotting soil a sinister quality which chilled me to the very core. The region was putrid with the carcasses of decaying fish and of other less describable things which I saw protruding from the nasty mud of the unending plain. Perhaps I should not hope to convey in mere words the unutterable hideousness that can dwell in absolute silence and barren immensity. There was nothing within hearing, and nothing in sight, save a vast reach of black slime. Yet the very completeness of the stillness and the homogeneity of the landscape oppressed me with a nauseating fear.
Are these octopi alive?
The sun was blazing down from a sky which seemed to me almost black in its cloudless cruelty, as though reflecting the inky marsh beneath my feet.
Why do they just keep moving? Oh, look at that. The origins of Dagon. Dagon seems to be inspired by Fishhead, a short novel by Irvin S. Cobb about unnatural affinities between a hybrid idiot and the strange fish of an isolated lake. Supernatural horror and literature, H.P. Lovecraft. And Lovecraft's dream about a strange island emerging from the ocean and him crawling in the ooze that covered its surface. I dreamed that whole hideous crawl, and yet feel the ooze sucking me down. Defense of Dagon, H.P. Lovecraft. Lovecraft's interest in the topic stemmed from his aversion to fish and the sea smells. In his own words, I have hated fish and feared the sea and everything connected with it since I was 2 years old, but I cannot recall what earlier experience gave me such a profound and lasting aversion to the sea and seafood. Dweller in Darkness, Lovecraft. There's just so many... Oh, that's...
As I crawled into the stranded boat, I realized that only one theory could explain my position. Through some unprecedented volcanic upheaval, a portion of the ocean floor must have been thrown to the surface, exposing regions for which innumerable millions of years had lain hidden under unfathomable watery depths.
Really?
So great was the extent of the new land which had risen beneath me that I could not detect the faintest noise of the surging ocean, straining my ears as I might.
I'm not sure if it's his son. But I know he's definitely one of the Cthulhu
Nor
mythos.
were there any seafowl to prey upon the dead things.
You know, you say dead things, but there's a lot of live things too. Let's go forward. I wish to find the... See, I feel like that's maybe a squid or a jellyfish. And that's an octopi. But I could be wrong. I believe squid usually have a different body, but like you can't really see their bodies like this, and I think they have like slightly different tentacles.
For several hours I sat thinking or brooding in the boat, which lay upon its side and afforded a slight shade as the sun moved across the heavens. As the day progressed, the ground lost some of its stickiness and seemed likely to dry sufficiently for traveling purposes in a short time. That night I slept but little, and the next day I made for myself a pack containing food and water, preparatory to an overland journey in search of the vanished sea and possible rescue.
I just realized I probably missed something on the last one, but whatever. Let's forward. Okay, I don't see anything.
On the third morning, I found the soil dry enough to walk upon with ease. The odor of the fish was maddening, but I was too much concerned with graver things to mind so slight an evil, and set out boldly for an unknown goal.
Whoever modeled this did a really good job.
All day I forged steadily westward, guided by a faraway hummock which rose higher than any other elevation on the rolling desert.
Some of these things don't look normal.
That night I encamped, and on the following day still travelled toward the hummock, though that object seemed scarcely nearer than when I had first espied it.
The horrors of the ocean. The creator of the Cthulhu mythos and the fictional underwater city of Raleigh was convinced that life could not exist at the bottom of the ocean because the water pressure would make it uninhabitable. Today we know that the darkest depths of the ocean are home to many peculiar organisms. The deepest dwelling fish we have discovered so far, the Mariana snailfish, can live about 8,000 meters, more than 26,000 feet, below the ocean surface, in never-ending darkness and at hellishly crushing pressures, hundreds of times stronger than those found at sea level. Upon glancing at the modern photos of deep-sea creatures such as the anglerfish, the fangtooth, or the viperfish, and their truly Lovecraftian characteristics, it's hard not to find some irony in this.
By the fourth evening, I attained the base of the mound, which turned out to be much higher than it had appeared from a distance. An intervening valley setting it out in sharper relief from the general surface. Too weary to ascend, I slept in the shadow of the hill. I know not why my dreams were so wild that night, but ere the waning and fantastically gibbous moon had risen far above the eastern plain, I was awake in a cold perspiration, determined to sleep no more.
Oh, it's so beautiful.
Such visions as I had experienced were too much for me to endure again, and in the glow of the moon I saw how unwise I had been to travel by day. Without the glare of the parching sun, my journey would have cost me less energy. Indeed, I now felt quite able to perform the ascent which had deterred me at sunset. Picking up my pack, I started for the crest of the eminence.
The loner. Contrary to popular opinion, Lovecraft was not an ever-frowning, eccentric, grumpy loner. He considered himself to be a person who appreciated humor. Moreover, he would often meet with friends in his apartment or at various cafes in Brooklyn and Manhattan. At times, his social life was so intensive his work would suffer for months. There was a point when he finally decided he needed to put an end to daily meetings and loitering in New York cafeterias, and it resorted to hiding at home and reading with the main room light turned off, pretending that he wasn't there whenever a friend knocked on his door. He also had another method of deterring his guests, which involved greeting them in a bathrobe, with an unmade bed visible in the background and piles of papers scattered across the floor. We do know giant squids
said that the
exist.
unbroken monotony of the rolling plain was a source of vague horror to me. But I think my horror was greater when I gained the summit of the mound and looked down the other side into an immeasurable pit or canyon, whose black recesses the moon had not yet soared high enough to illumine. I felt myself on the edge of the world, peering over the rim into a fathomless chaos of eternal night. Through my terror ran curious reminiscences of Paradise Lost, and of Satan's hideous climb through the unfashioned realms of darkness. As the moon climbed higher in the sky, I began to see that the slopes of the valley were not quite so perpendicular as I had imagined. Ledges and outcroppings of rock afforded fairly easy footholds for a descent. Whilst after a drop of only a few hundred feet, the declivity became very gradual. Urged on by an impulse which I cannot definitely analyze, I scrambled with difficulty down the rocks and stood on the gentler slope beneath.
I was born twice.
Gazing into the Stygian deeps, where no light had yet penetrated.
Stygian is another word that I'm pretty sure Lovecraft really liked to use.
All at once, my
familiar.
attention was captured by a vast and singular object on the opposite slope, which rose steeply about 100 yards ahead of me. An object that gleamed whitely in the newly bestowed rays of the ascending moon. That it was merely a gigantic piece of stone, I soon assured myself. But I was conscious of a distinct impression that its contour and position were not altogether the work of nature. A closer scrutiny filled me with sensations I cannot express. For despite its enormous magnitude, and its position in an abyss which had yawned at the bottom of the sea since the world was young, I perceived beyond a doubt that the strange object was a well-shaped monolith, whose massive bulk had known the workmanship and perhaps the worship of living and thinking creatures. Dazed and frightened, yet not without a certain thrill of the scientist's or archaeologist's delight. I examined my surroundings more closely. The moon, now near the zenith, shone weirdly and vividly above the towering steeps that hemmed in the chasm, and revealed the fact that a far-flung body of water flowed at the bottom, winding out of sight in both directions and almost lapping my feet as I stood on the slope. Across the chasm, the wavelets washed the base of the Cyclopean monolith, on whose surface I could now trace both inscriptions and crude sculptures. The writing was in a system of hieroglyphics unknown to me and unlike anything I'd ever seen in books, consisting for the most part of conventionalized aquatic symbols such as fishes, eels, octopi, crustaceans, mollusks, whales, and the like. Several characters obviously represented marine things which are unknown to the modern world. But whose decomposing forms I had observed on the ocean-risen plain. It was the pictorial carving, however, that did most to hold me spellbound.
Storytelling methods. Dagon contains many themes and storytelling methods that Lovecraft developed in his later works, such as telling the story through carvings at the Mountains of Madness, the Nameless City, journals and characters' notes, the shadow of time, or the shadow out of time, the haunter of the dark, islands emerging from the ocean, the Call of Cthulhu, or fictional beings and deities based on real events and mythologies. Migo on the Whisperer in Darkness. It's also considered the origin of the popular Cthulhu mythos. Some of Lovecraft's other stories also conclude in a manner similar to Dagon, but let's skip the details in order not to spoil the ending. If it concludes like some of the other Lovecraftian things that I have seen, it won't conclude well.
Plainly visible across the intervening water, on account of their enormous size, were an array of bas-reliefs whose subjects would have excited the envy of a Doré. I think that these things were supposed to depict men, at least a certain sort of men, though the creatures were shown disporting like fishes in the waters of some marine grotto, or paying homage at some monolithic shrine which appeared to be under the waves as well. Of their faces and forms I dare not speak in detail, for the mere remembrance makes me grow faint, grotesque beyond the imagination of a Poe or a Bulwer. They were damnably human in general outline, despite webbed hands and feet, shockingly wide and flabby lips.
Does Lovecraftian horror ever end well? I'm not aware of any ending in Lovecraftian mythos that ends well.
Glassy, bulging eyes, and other features less pleasant to recall. Curiously enough, they seem to have been chiseled badly out of proportion with their scenic background, for one of the creatures was shown in the act of killing a whale, represented as but little larger than himself. I remarked, as I say, their grotesqueness and strange size, but in a moment decided that they were merely the imaginary gods of some primitive fishing or seafaring tribe, some tribe whose last descendant had perished eras before the first ancestor of the Piltdown or Neanderthal man was born. Awestruck at this unexpected glimpse into a past beyond the conception of the most daring anthropologist, I stood musing whilst the moon cast queer reflections on the silent channel before me. Then, suddenly, I saw it. With only a slight churning to mark its rise to the surface, the thing slid into view above the dark waters. And loathsome, it darted like a stupendous monster of nightmares to the monolith, about which it flung its gigantic scaly arms, while it bowed its hideous head and gave vent to certain measured sounds. I think I went mad then. Of my frantic ascent of the sloping cliff and of my delirious journey back to the stranded boat, I remember little.
Oh, he just ran. Like he just straight up like, nah, fam, I'm out. Don't see anything that really.
I believe I sang a great deal and laughed oddly when I was unable to sing.
That sounds about right.
I have indistinct recollections of a great storm sometime after I reached the boat. At any rate, I know that I heard bells of thunder and other tones which nature utters only in her wildest moods.
Oh, I passed out. Okay.
When I came out of the shadows, I was in a San Francisco hospital.
Yes, it's supposed to be a giant crab
Brought
monster.
thither by the captain of the American ship which had picked up my boat in mid-ocean. In my delirium, I had said much, but found that my words had been given scant attention. Of any land upheaval in the Pacific, my rescuers knew nothing, nor did I deem it necessary to insist upon a thing which I knew they could not believe.
Okay then. In defense of Dagon. In 1921, Lovecraft released a series of 3 essays: The Defense Reopens, The Defense Remains Open, and The Final Words. Later published as a collection titled In Defense of Dagon, in which he rebuked a series of criticisms directed at his works. Some notable quotes: "I paint what I dream, and I will let the public settle the rest among themselves. Mr. Monday asks the raison d'etre of Dagon. I will give it, purely and simply to reproduce a mood. Its object is the simplest in all art: portrayal. The physical horrors of war, no matter how extreme and unprecedented, hardly have a bearing on the entirely different realm of supernatural terror. Ghosts are still ghosts. The mind can get more thrills from unrealities than from realities." In the essay, Lovecraft touches upon the topics of atheism, materialism, the quest for truth, and the love of science. The atheist. Lovecraft considers himself an atheist and an absolute materialist, which he attributed particularly to his early childhood interest in astronomy and science in general. In his own words, "I am indeed an absolute materialist so far as actual belief goes, with not a shred of credence in any form of supernaturalism, religion, spiritualism, transcendentalism, metaphysicosis, or immortality. All I can say is that I think it is damned unlikely that anything like a central cosmic will, a spirit world, or an eternity survival of personality exist. They are the most preposterous and unjustified of all guesses which can be made about in the universe, and I am not enough of an hair splitter to pretend that I don't regard them as errant and negligible moonshine. In theory, I am an agnostic, but pending the appearance of radical evidence, I must be classed, practically and provisionally, as an atheist." Lovecraft was a prominent figure in the world of amateur journalism. In 1915, he started publishing his own journal called The Conservative, which included political and social commentary, poetry, short stories, and literary criticism written by him and other authors. Howard was Howard was a skilled wordsmith, but he also took criticism to heart, which resulted in his decision to step away from writing poetry and concentrate on weird fiction again. For the first time, HP. And focus for the first time since his teenage years. Dagon, published in 1919, is one of the short stories written during that period. In this excerpt from The Conservative, the master of horror fiction explains his attitude towards warfare and the idea of world peace. Why any sane human being can believe in the possibility of universal peace is more than the conservative can fathom. Should the entire civilized world agree simultaneously to disarm, one or more nations would undoubtedly retain secret armaments, and the proper time take advantage of their more altruistic and less astute contemporaries in a wild career of conquest against unarmed victims. No country is or ever can be above warfare until the basic impulses of the human animal shall have miraculously changed. I actually really agree with that.
Once I sought out a celebrated ethnologist and amused him with peculiar questions regarding the ancient Philistine legend of Dagon, the fish god.
Dagon, or Dagon, was the main deity of the Philistines, worshipped throughout the Middle East and the ancient god of fertility and crops. In Hebrew, the word Dagon was a common noun for grain. The rulers of Akkad, Mesopotamia, chose him as a patron saint of their war conquests. He also appeared as the judge of the dead in an Assyrian poem and an underworld prison warder in one of the Babylonian texts. He's often mistakenly taken for a fish god due to the wrong interpretations of his name. As in Hebrew, the word dag means fish. In H.P. Lovecraft's work, Dagon is an underwater deity ruling over the deep ones, a humanoid race with fish traits that resides in oceans. He is worshipped by a secret cult called the Esoteric Order of Dagon. Oh, so he really was a real deity? Or is that... Yeah, he was a real deity. Huh. News to me. Well, that goes forward. Any more tips and tricks and fun things to read? Nothing? Nothing fun? Okay.
But soon perceiving that he was hopelessly conventional, I did not press my inquiries.
That's the Necronomicon. Like, are we just... Oh, okay. August Derleth and the Cthulhu Mythos. August Derleth was an American writer and anthologist. He also befriended Lovecraft and published many of his works through his company, Arkham House. Although he greatly contributed to the popularization of the author's works after his death, he is surrounded by numerous controversies. One of his most questionable decisions involved introducing the good versus evil doctrine. Derleth was a devout Catholic to the Cthulhu mythos, which contrasted with Lovecraft's view of the world and his approach to cosmic horror. As a result, the author's works are often misunderstood and misrepresented in today's culture. It is also worth noting that Lovecraft was never really interested in creating a mythology, and the term Cthulhu mythos was coined by Derleth after the author left the mortal plane. The Marketeer. Lovecraft's attempts to find a job in 1925 were influenced by advice he received from friends. Among others, he started freelancing as a marketing magazine where he would write announcements and commercials. Feel free to judge his copywriting skills for yourself. From an ad for Curtis Woodwork. Curtis Woodwork embraces both the usual structural units and the cleverest contrivances of built-in or permanent furniture such as bookcases, dressers, buffets, and cupboards. Every model is conceived and created with the purest art, ripest scholarship, and mellowest craftsmanship which energetic enterprise can command, and made to conform rigidly to the architecture of each particular type of home. The cost, considering the quality, is amazingly low, and a trademark on the individual pieces prevents any substitution by careless contractors. I mean, it sounds good, right? I wonder, can I see picture stories? It just says picture stories. Darn, I was hoping it would be something else. Yeah, essentially the Necronomicon is supposed to be the Book of the Dead, and it's how you bring all sorts of... It's essentially supposed to be a mythological... I think it's a mythological book, although I think there technically is a recreation, but it's made out of human skin, and it is full of incantations and rites and rituals to summon demons and do all sorts of hellish black magic. Look how she's looking at me. Oh. The scientist. These days, the word scientist is a widely accepted term, but at the time Dagon was published, it was subject to wide debate. After the author used it in the story, critics pointed out that man of science was a more appropriate term to employ. He admitted, in the defense of Dagon, that if Dagon were to be reprinted, he would indeed use the phrase they suggested. Scientist was coined as an analog to artist, to be used when referring to those studying different branches of science. Yet in the 19th and early 20th century, scientific researchers in Great Britain and the United States were of the opinion that a man of science, resembling the term man of letters, was the only proper choice. Among other things, it was gender-specific, indicated that science was an endeavor to be pursued by only one sex. The term scientist became more acceptable only after World War II, and man of science started fading into obscurity as an old-fashioned synonym. It's like a find all the symbols kind of thing.
It is at night, especially when the moon is gibbous and waning, that I see the thing. I tried morphine, but the drug has given only transient surcease, and has drawn me into its clutches as a hopeless slave. So now I am to end it all, having written a full account for the information or the contemptuous amusement of my fellow men.
Lovecraft on tobacco and alcohol. Lovecraft hated tobacco, even though he used to smoke when he was 12 in order to look and feel like an adult. In his correspondence with friend Reinhard Kleiner, he claims that he quit as soon as he started wearing long pants. He also had a very strong opinion about alcohol, as evidenced by his letter to Zelia Brown, dated the 13th of February, 1928. As for the matter of drinking, I have never tasted intoxicating liquor and never intend to, having a strong aesthetic disgust at anything which blunts or coarses the delicate natural equipoise of the evolved human intellect and imagination. Drinking excited my personal repugnance, hence I don't drink. Let the herd do what they will. I am rather in favor of prohibition. The prohibition of any one antisocial force as well as any other. So he really didn't like alcohol. He's just gonna kill himself, I guess.
Often, I ask myself if it could not all have been a pure phantasm, a mere freak of fever as I lay sun-stricken and raving in the open boat after my escape from the German man-of-war. This I ask myself, but ever does there come before me a hideously vivid vision in reply. I cannot think of the deep sea without shuddering at the nameless things that may at this very moment be crawling and floundering on its slimy bed, worshipping their ancient stone idols and carving their own detestable likenesses on submarine obelisks of water-soaked granite. I dream of a day when they may rise above the billows to drag down into their reeking talons the remnants of puny, war-exhausted mankind. Of a day when the land shall sink and the dark ocean shall ascend amidst universal pandemonium.
I'm getting chills. I don't like this. It's really uncomfortable.
The end is near.
I don't like it.
I hear a noise at the door, as of some immense slippery body lumbering against it.
Anything to save me? No? We're just gonna die soon? I guess we're just gonna die. Okay.
It shall not find me. God, that hand! The window! The window!
We hope you enjoyed immersing yourself in our little pool of cosmic horror. We'd appreciate it if you took a moment to rate Dagon and check out the other games and DLCs. I think I might have this one, or is it the little glass bottle? I don't know. I think I have one of these. So pretty. Well, that's actually perfect timing, because we just about finished up for the day. So that was Dagon by H.P. Lovecraft, which was an interactive novel. Honestly, I loved it. I think that the voice acting was excellent, that they did a great job as far as, oh, look, I missed some. I think they did a great job as far as, the design and capturing the essence and everything like that. So that is our enjoyable Friday night game. So not a spooky, scary skeletons game, but still, I thought it was a pretty good game overall. There was no fish girl. Dagon's a boy. Well, technically, I don't think he's a boy, but I think, like, they identify him as a male. Well, it's okay, Mama. I figured you had something to do. So, I wanted to let you guys know that my socials for my pre-debut VTuber account are now live, which I will actually drop a link. Let me drop a link so that I can let you guys know exactly what it is. Because getting Monster Waifu was a little challenging at times, so sometimes I had to change it to the Monster Waifu or your Monster Waifu. There we go. So I'm going to post the... I have to sign into chat. I'm already signed in. Wow. Okay. With that being said, so my socials on Twitch is your Monster Waifu. On Twitter is the Monster Waifu, and on YouTube is at Monster Waifu. So I guess technically I should have done your Monster Waifu on Twitter, but oh well, it's already done. It's already done. So that being said, I hope you all have a great night. I will see you next week, and have a wonderful evening. Bye, darlings.